we'll get a trash truck. We'll go to Belgium and we'll burn counterfeits. That sounds like an awesome opportunity.
The Imitation Nation podcast covers all things counterfeit, hosted by Shabir and Bersafdar of the Partnership for Safe Medicines and Sven Bergman of Venture Global. All statements are their own and not the opinions of their employers.
Welcome to Imitation Nation 19. Hey, Sven, how you doing?
Hey, Shabir, I'm awesome. How are you, man?
I'm good. Did you have a power outage? That's what I think you said.
I do. Yes, I do have a power outage. I am jimmy-rigging something right now between my phone and a hotspot and on my laptop, and it's all good. It'll all work. And the power company told us we'd have power back in about 3 hours, so it'll be fine.
As you know, we were doing a podcast yesterday with a sheriff and some undercover agents, and my bandwidth went out in the middle of it. And I was Jack's raging internet-dependent white-collar employee.
It is crazy. Anyways, how is everything in your life? All good?
It's all good. Just getting ready to start the college selection process for my second child, who is uniquely different than my first child.
I hear you. I'm in the same. I'm actually going off to Virginia today to look at some colleges with one of my daughters. So I hear you. Anyways, well, why don't we start this pod off, Shabir? I think, if I'm not mistaken, you found something really interesting.
So we aren't the Tariff Nation podcast. We are the Imitation Nation podcast. But of course, everything related to all the changes in shipping affects the flow of counterfeit products into the U.S., including tariffs and de minimis regulation changes. And FedEx just announced to analysts that all the changes around tariffs and shipping rules is going to hit their finances to a total tune of $1 billion, 300 million of which is directly attributable to costs associated with clearing goods through customs, which, as you know, has not only gotten more complicated, but has changed several times since the beginning of the year.
Yeah, no, that's incredible. That's obviously awful to hear that a U.S. company is going to have that kind of impact. And, to your other point, that's what we expected, right? That's what we saw from DHL initially when they said, all right, we're done. We're not sending to the U.S. market for the same reason, because clearing everything through regular entry is just a very much more cumbersome process. And if all of a sudden you're trying to funnel, let's everybody remember the number, 1.4 billion parcels through that system, the manpower with that is immense. So I expect for that disruption to continue. I hope it's not hitting their earnings. I hope they're able to offset that somewhere. But it's certainly a troubling development that we see this. And I also do worry about what that strain on these freight forwarders and shippers, what that transition strain will do for them to being really diligent about data and inspections and making sure that they don't allow counterfeit in their system. Because if you create so much cost pressure on one side, will companies decide to take cost pressure off from another side? So I don't know that yet, but yeah, that report was very troubling to see.
The interesting thing I thought about all this is that FedEx said that their revenue would increase by 4 to 6% this year. Now, of course, that's revenue, right? That's not net profit. So the $1 billion, and especially the 300 million of that billion that is for higher costs, could mean that the revenue is going up a small amount, but the market expects them to actually have a worse business. And I think that's been shown because FedEx's stock is dropped 19% this year, which means that the market found that they were about a fifth overvalued based upon the changes from shipping and tariffs and customs rules, which is pretty scary to see that for what is, I think, one of the most admired and well-run companies in the U.S.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and I don't, I know that FedEx officially said that this is not going to hit their top line revenue number. Let's see what their real earnings will say. I'm not so sure about that, because I don't know if all of these, 1.4 billion parcels can be moved over into kind of your regular standard entry versus de minimis. If there's 300 million additional costs, if you then also get a revenue cut from it, that'll be problematic again. But if we want to look at it on the bright side for Imitation Nation, since as you point out, we're not the Tariff Nation podcast, but the counterfeit focus podcast, with postal services basically pretty much having stopped the small parcel shipments to a large degree, the only thing that's left over is commercial carriers. And if commercial carriers say, hey, this is really too complicated for me to do, maybe their due diligence will get better to identify who is shipping it. And so they will be moving even less counterfeit. And then with decreased volume, it'll become better inspections. But I'm very skeptical that FedEx says they won't have a top line revenue hit on that. So we'll see.
Yeah. Tell me what you've got about this new development out of the EU, Belgium specifically, I think.
That's correct. So the last podcast for us was all like good news. This one seems to be the one with the dark clouds on the horizon. So we have a troubling development out of Belgium. Customs officials there say that major fashion brands, including Nike and Adidas, that are named in the article that's linked to the show notes, are allowing counterfeits goods into the country to avoid disposal costs. So kind of here's what's going on, or here's what is happening. Customs can always and does flag suspicious shipments for inspection, but under EU law, the final decision rests with the brand. So it gets flagged to the brand. They say, yes, we think this is counterfeit, and then customs will seize it. If the brand is confirmed that it's fake, they also at the same moment have to tell customs, and here's what we want to do with these fake goods. So customs in Belgium doesn't keep them. They basically say, okay, we have all these counterfeits. Where can we ship them to you so you can destroy them? And so the problem here now comes that for the companies, the cost to recycle or to destroy these goods is sometimes up to 3 times higher than, and now comes the really crazy thing, than simply letting them go back or simply shipping them back or simply shipping them forward. So the costs are 3 times as high to do the right thing and pull them out of market because you would need to destroy them or recycle them. And so as a result, Belgium, and especially the airport in Liège, has become a growing hub for counterfeit imports from China because these counterfeiters are smart, right? So they know this. They know that if we flood that particular port, the brands will say, yeah, I don't need $50 million in destruction costs. And as a result, we have seen especially this port and Belgium starting to be a dumping ground for counterfeits and becoming an entry portal for counterfeit goods into the European Union, because keep in mind, once it's in Belgium, it can go anywhere in the EU, right? There's no restrictions within the EU. So it is a significant issue. And for me, it goes back to when we discussed it actually on one of the last parts about destruction authority. I want for every custom authority to have the simplest of destruction authorities, which is, it is a counterfeit. I see it's a counterfeit. I have a big shredder right next to my desk, and I just throw it in that big shredder and we move on. Like that's my dream, or an incinerator, one of the two. But until that happens, we have to figure out how customs and brands can deal with these massive amount of paperwork and the destruction costs that actually come with the enforcement that you want.
Is it really? I mean, is it really anything harder than maybe there's some embedded vendor who has the contract to destroy things coming out of that port in Belgium, and they're just charging an obscene price? Like, could this problem be fixed if the brand owners were allowed to select their own destruction vendor and just submit a certificate of destruction?
Yeah. So the problem with all that is, and so I have some experience from a previous job there. As folks know, I used to work for Philip Morris Altria internally, and we got very, very successful working with law enforcement to seize a lot of illicit tobacco, counterfeit cigarettes, etc. And the problem there we had is that we've started to run into the same issue, that we started to have large requests for destruction of products. And in that space, for example, you can't just destroy it. There's a special EPA process on how you have to get rid of it. There's an entire process about these products being bonded and in secure warehouses until you destroy them. And in the clothing area, it's very similar. While you think, oh, it's just a t-shirt, nay, I can't just burn that. because most likely there's some form of, plastic or non-natural fiber in there. So I now have to incinerate that in a special process. There's, on the illicit vapes that we discussed on the last pod, same thing there. That's actually like specialized burn units that have to be authorized by the EPA that can destroy these things. So unfortunately, it's not as easy to say, oh, somebody just destroy it. It does add up. And now the company is faced with, okay, so I have this counterfeit coming in, which I want off the market, but to get it off the market, it's millions. How do I justify that to the bottom line? And as we know, and we discussed it actually in the last pod, brand protection units are not always seen as revenue generators, right? So now you just added another line item of like, hey, boss, sorry, I need another 10 million to destroy the goods I'm seizing. It creates an additional obstacle for brand protection organizations to do the right thing, because now I have to go and ask for more money. And can it be done more efficiently? Maybe, but it's still a currently high cost.
Wow. Well, that's not good news. Sounds like a business opportunity, or at least a regulatory reform opportunity to make the right thing happen. So I'm sorry
There's
to
a business
hear that.
opportunity for you and I. We'll get a trash truck. We'll go to Belgium and we'll burn counterfeits. It sounds like an awesome opportunity. Let's do that.
No, I don't want to run a regulatable business in the EU. Absolutely not. That is not my dream.
That's fair. All right. What else did you find? I think you found something about some Chinese nationals that pled guilty in a really interesting case.
Yeah. So what's happening is that Homeland Security investigations and the IRS helped uncover this scheme for two Chinese nationals who were charged and now convicted in what is a return fraud scheme. And what they were doing is they were smuggling counterfeit Apple products, iPhones, iPads, and other Apple products into the U.S. And they're counterfeit, right? Bringing them
Right.
to the stores, Apple stores, and then claiming they're defective and getting replacements that were real, which they managed to actually use real serial numbers on these products, and they were under warranty. So, somewhere out there, someone had, maybe your own stolen device, or a device that had a serial number clone from something you were actually using. And they did this, it took a decade, and they did this with 27,000 devices. They made an estimated of $16 million. And the two of the main Chinese nationals have already pleaded guilty, and they've not been sentenced. They're facing decades. Several others, including the ringleader, have also entered guilty pleas. And I don't know that they've actually found all the aspects of this. I just want to say, along with how clever this is and how much this happens in every industry, return fraud is not an unusual technique. I just think it's fascinating here that they managed to do it with real serial number phones that people had. And as anyone who has spent any time online knows, if you get your iPhone stolen and it ends up in China, which it often does, you start getting these text messages to your new phone asking you to remove the phone from Find My Device, because as long as it's there, those guys can't use it. But that would not be a returnable phone. So somehow they figured out your real serial number and then built them into the new fake phones, and then managed to return them and fool the Apple Store employees with all their access to all the databases. I just find, and no actual identity checks, I just find it stunning that they got away with this for so long.
Yeah. No, 100%. So for me, the thing is, just that, the case is incredible. I just keep reading it. Couple of things here. First of all, as always, big shout out and congratulations to HSI for uncovering that, investigating that, and getting this to conviction or guilty plea, which is fantastic. So terrific they're doing this. However, this is my personal opinion here. I don't think law enforcement should be in charge of something that appears for me something that really can be an internal Apple thing that they should fix. And the reason why I say this is as you said, they used real serial numbers, which means they probably bought a bunch of phones and then copied those serial numbers, put them on the back of other devices, and then kept returning them, figured out that that's a loophole, that those used up serial numbers are not checked out of Apple's system or however it is not linked. And they're like, awesome, we can keep running the serial number. And they probably ran the same serial number multiple times until it's there. So for me, this is always one of these like own goals, right? So yes, I think it's obviously always awful when crime happens. This one, I don't feel bad for Apple for. I just really don't. It's like one of these, and trust me, there's plenty of clients when we start working with them where we come in and start to look at the issues that they're having. And the first thing we always do is an internal audit to say, is your house clean? That's what we call it, right? And I can't tell you the amount of clients that we have found where they're doing things where either the supply chain is not tight or they allow returns through third parties. Costco used to be a massive issue for many companies where a lot of counterfeit was flowing back in through, where you have an outdated, return system through some return center that's a third party that doesn't check stuff. So there's lots of these things that for clients we always kind of like first step, let's make sure internally your house is in order. For a company the size of Apple to not have something where they scan the serial number and it says, boop, no, that phone is supposed to be in Sweden, right? Or whatever it is. Or no, this phone was returned for the third time now is incredible. Now, and also, last point, according to the plea deal here, they ran the scheme for almost 10 years, Shabir. Okay. So this is not a short term like, oh, that's a cool idea, let's run it. From 2015 to 2024, the youngest convicted is 27 years old. He started when he's 17. I'm just saying that's a really long crime horizon for Apple to not catch on to this. And I can guarantee you that's not the only one of these cases that exist. That's just the one where HSI, again, big shout out to HSI, was able to step in and disrupt it.
Propose an alternate theory here, which is that this was done very, very cleverly for a long time, and some brand protection staffer, some young whippersnapper at Apple actually found it, something that was running under everybody's nose, and helped build the case, and they handed it over to HSI at the point at which they had enough proof to lay out the conspiracy. It could have gone that way, but I agree. Anyone defrauding you for 10 years, you probably need to examine your in-house controls. You probably overlooked something structurally in your systems for a very long time. I actually think you could do this, by the way, with medicine, which makes me a little sad. But you could actually, as you were dispensing medicine, if you were a crooked pharmacy, you could keep the serial numbers and then sell them to a counterfeiter who would then go and print up the bottles, fill them with likely looking pills, and then they would return them. I think the folks at the manufacturer hopefully would do some spot checks that would spot that problem, or ask you, where did you get so many $3,000 bottles of medicine that you bought but didn't need to return? But technically, I think you could do it. I think that, the brand protection people in drug manufacturing, I know, probably would look at you funny and double check your work, and then it would all fall apart. But I think technically it's probably doable in almost every industry, if you're asleep at the wheel, which somebody at Apple was.
No, it's just amazing that they and again, just to recap this, right? They had counterfeit Apple phones that obviously also were good enough that they passed initial inspections at the store. They slapped they slapped a real serial number from a real iPhone on there, returned it, said it was broken, and then Apple, after they sent it also because I've recently dealt with Apple on an actual repair, they didn't send it to whoever is the repairers. They run diagnostics on it, and if it can't be repaired, they send you a new device. So nowhere from the scanning it in the store to inspecting it in their actual facility did it trigger like something is not checking out. The serial number that's on the outside of the phone might not transfer to the inside of the phone. I don't know. It's incredible that it didn't. And they then just like, nope, that doesn't work. Fine, we'll send you a new phone out, which obviously very amazing customer service by Apple. But to do that for 10 years and 27,000 phones, it's incredible. Absolutely incredible.
Well, in the quick hits, I wanted to highlight this video from I guess I'll call him an e-commerce influencer. He's a
Hmm.
gentleman who has a book about how you can start an e-commerce business that is very profitable. But what I thought was interesting about him was he has gone into the weeds enough on the issue of tariffs that he has a whole explainer video about when you have a product that with a small modification could be a different category of product, the tariff could be wildly different. And so this influencer, Steve Chu, has a whole video where he shows how your shirt could become a vest with a small product change and how the tariff for that could be wildly different. And there is, and I would call this sort of borderline fraud, there is also some discussion about making the final country of origin a lower tariff country in order to avoid the tariff from China, which might be 90% versus the tariff from
Yeah.
Costa Rica, which might be 15.
Mm.
I'm not so sure I would adopt that one. But he goes into it and I thought that was super interesting. And so we'll put a link to that video in the show notes.
Oh, that'd be good. So mine is, you would expect for it to be Labubu dolls, which you will see in the show notes, and we have it because there's an entire Labubu roundup of large seizures of that, a New York Times report on how to spot the right one, a useful guide. Anyways, not getting into that. What I want to get into is the following. For me, it's a big win. You remember a couple of episodes ago when we covered that somebody was selling fake body armor, right,
And they were
to law
smuggling into the
enforcement?
country in cover loads. I remember this.
That's right. Smuggled it in cover loads, distributed body armor, bulletproof vests to law enforcement. Did it for a long time in my home state of Ohio. And our AG Yost was kind enough to step in and prosecute him. And the nice thing is that that person was now convicted to 5 years in prison for selling counterfeit body armor to law enforcement. So for me, that's a win. I almost think 5 years is not long enough because I really think it is just some of the most despicable thing I've seen in a while. But big win, thanks to AG Yost for amazing work. May that individual have a terrific time in prison.
Yeah, I don't know. There's faking medicine that people need to stay alive, and faking body armor that's supposed to stop bullets from law enforcement who are in harm's way. I'm pretty sure they're somewhere in the same awful ninth circle of hell that that you end up in after this life is over.
That's
I
agreed.
do want to mention, and we don't have to go through all of them, but I do want to mention that we are seeing now a surge of fake weight loss drugs, the diabetes and obesity injectables
Yeah,
in
as
Europe,
expected.
which is not surprising. It's from a story in Politico and also in CNBC. The market for these things is still big. Insurance coverage is difficult to pour. The effects of them are not disputed. They are life-changing medicines. I think we will be talking about this generation as the one that actually made a dent in obesity because of them. But
Agreed.
we are also seeing fakes, and we've seen them in the
Yeah.
US and we're seeing them in Europe, and we're going to be stuck with this problem for a while, I think.
I fully agree with you on that. And then the one story that I quickly like to cover, and one of them is because we always call balls and strikes, so I want to call a ball and strike on ourselves. We had a story a couple of weeks ago where we were so impressed that StockX was taking such amazing proactive efforts to take down millions of counterfeit shoes, and we're like, wow, that's so great, a marketplace doing this. Well, funny thing is, the report just came out that StockX just settled a long-standing lawsuit with Nike over trademark and actually selling counterfeits. So looking back at it, yeah, so I guess the real reason why StockX started that very aggressive program to get rid of counterfeits is because Nike was suing them for counterfeits. Now, the outcome is positive. StockX now probably has a better process in place, which is terrific. But I'm going to take the laurels away that I gave him a couple of episodes ago where I said, wow, this is great, to, I guess this was court ordered. And so just wanted to call that out.
Well, the last one I want to cover, and there'll be more stories in the show notes, and you can cover them if you want. But we've talked before about counterfeit alcohol, counterfeit high-end
Okay.
alcohol, and there was just a story about consumers in South Africa who are just very, very brand conscious, buying counterfeits at prices that are too good to be true and knowing that those prices are too good to be true. And I guess it's one thing if you just want to have it on your shelf, but there's no such thing as an alcohol that sits on your shelf and never gets drunk, except for vodka in my house because we don't drink vodka. So every time somebody brings a bottle of vodka, it stays there. But there's just no way to really appreciate the risks of moonshine, legally produced moonshine. I mean, you can die from drinking illegally produced counterfeit alcohol if the person who made it doesn't know that much about what they're making. And so those risks are significant, but you still have these consumers in South Africa who are buying these for the brand halo from those counterfeit bottles. And I just want to warn everybody that if you've got a friend that makes their own moonshine or you've got someone who's got half price rum, you should just think really, really hard about where you're getting it from. A 2-for-1 sale at Bevmo is one thing, but a buddy who's got a case of Cuban rum that fell off a truck is probably somebody who you want to be really careful with because you could die from drinking that if it's the wrong thing.
Yeah. I've worked for some clients on illicit alcohol, very, very prominent in the African continent, was culturally ingrained there, and deeply problematic because there's a big difference between drinking regular alcohol and ethanol or something, or it just because it can blind you. Like there's some real health impacts here. And the last one I want to quickly say, and this will be a 2-second shout out. CNBC did an amazing story that is starting to describe how Walmart's e-commerce platform is really starting to be a counterfeit haven of just crooks, criminals that hang out there. And they detail all the products that were sent out that are counterfeit, false, not as advertised. And in addition, those folks then who advertise on their platforms then steal people's identities and also do identity fraud. So it goes back to what I keep saying on this podcast. I want for platforms, marketplace platforms, to do better, as well as social media platforms. Do better, try harder. Don't allow these people on your platforms. I know profit is important, but just do better. It's an eye-opening report. I want for everybody to read it, and I hope that these companies soon do better.
And with that, I think we've reached the end of Imitation Nation number 19. I know you're getting on a plane, Sven, so safe travels.
Thank you so much, Shabir, and please read us out.
The Imitation Nation podcast is a production of Cause Stories and is the sole owner. Podcast production by Anna Rowland, management by Sarah Imber Safdar, and theme music written by Jonathan Boyle.